This is The World This Weekend. Good evening, I'm Stephanie Skandaris. On tonight's show,
So it's a reminder that things like freedom and democracy often have to be fought for. And so their fight is our fight.
a promise of solidarity with Ukraine as Russian President Vladimir Putin faces war crimes charges. And if you're hoping to make an environmentally friendly choice with your investments, some expert advice on how to avoid greenwashing.
When it comes to marketing of green investments, it is a little bit of a Wild West.
And later in the show, March Madness is here. It's one of North America's most exciting sporting events, this time with a record number of Canadians making their mark. That's coming up, but first. 9 years ago today, Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula. Some experts say the move set the stage for the full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year. Ukraine says it will fight to expel Russia from Crimea and all other territory that Russia has occupied. But Russian President Vladimir Putin has shown no intention of handing anything back. This week, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant against Putin, but not for invading Crimea. Philip Lishanok explains.
In the Crimean city Sevastopol, young cadets marched to mark the anniversary of the peninsula's 2014 annexation. Russian President Vladimir Putin toured a children's center and stressed the importance of holding the region. He didn't address the International Criminal Court's warrant for his arrest, which the Kremlin has called null and void. The International Tribunal has ordered Putin held on war crimes charges related to the deportation of Ukrainian children to Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called the ICC indictments historic because Putin is personally named for illegally kidnapping thousands of children.
He's clearly committed war crimes.
In Washington, D.C., just before boarding the Marine One helicopter, U.S. President Joe Biden said the ICC made the right move.
I think it justified it, but the question is, it's not recognized internationally by us either.
Russia and the United States are not members of the ICC. Philippe Sands is a professor of law and director of the Center on International Courts and Tribunals at University College in London. He says the ICC had reason to lay charges now.
It has had jurisdiction since 2015 in relation to the occupation of Crimea, and it hasn't done anything. So in particular in Ukraine, there is tremendous pressure on the prosecutor to have acted.
And he points out that Putin attended a rally at a stadium in Moscow where thousands of Ukrainian children were paraded on the anniversary of the invasion.
I think the strategy of the prosecutor, of course, will have been to get matters as high up the food chain, so to speak, as possible. And what's very striking about this indictment is that it names Vladimir Putin.
Sands says the forcible transfer of children is a violation of the provisions of the 1949 Geneva Conventions. But Ukrainians say it's also symbolic. By taking their children, they're robbing them of their future and hope.
If you feel hopeless, nothing happens.
In Toronto, author Margaret Atwood was among the group of academics raising money for Kyiv University. Erin Wendland, who organized the benefit, is a senior research fellow at Massey College at the University of Toronto.
They're already thinking about the future. So rebuilding starts now, basically. So the Ukrainian academics are thinking about what their country is going to look like.
And Wendland says Canada should help keep hopes for the post-war future of Ukraine alive. Philip Lishanok, CBC News, Toronto.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump says he expects to be arrested next week. He posted the comments on his Truth Social site this morning. Trump didn't provide any evidence or say what the charges would be, but he's calling on his supporters to protest. Sam Sampson takes us through what's going on.
When I'm back in the White House,
A recent Donald Trump campaign video repeats his vision. He sees himself back in the Oval Office, but in a few days, he sees himself in handcuffs. In a Saturday morning social media post written in all caps, Trump claimed he'll be arrested Tuesday. He calls the Manhattan District Attorney corrupt and highly political. The Manhattan District Attorney's office said prosecutors won't confirm or comment on the post or potential charges. The DA's office is investigating whether or not Trump allowed hush money to go to adult film star Stormy Daniels in 2016. Daniels alleges she had a sexual encounter with the former president. Trump has denied all allegations. The DA's office invited Trump last week to testify in front of a grand jury. Now, if he is indicted, Trump would only be arrested if he didn't surrender. A Trump spokesperson said there wasn't any notification of a pending arrest.
The truth is, he might have received heads up from law enforcement that he had a surrender date.
Elliot Williams is a former Deputy Assistant Attorney General at the Justice Department.
Or he's just making it up based on things that he read in the newspaper. And there's no way to know either of those things. But to be clear, there's nothing novel about a defendant getting a call from law enforcement prior to being asked to turn himself or herself in.
Trump posted multiple times on Saturday, repeating a call for protest.
We the people stand with our great president, Donald J. Trump.
Protests were few and far between on Saturday. One group cruising around Palm Beach, Florida in a boat with a megaphone.
Another fake investigation against our great president.
So far, nothing comparable to what happened the last time Trump called for protest. January 6, 2021, a deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol. Hearings revealed Trump was the central cause for the attack. In a tweet, Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy calls the issue an outrageous abuse of power by a radical DA. He says he'll investigate whether prosecutors looking into Trump are using federal funds. Now, if this all happens next week and Trump is indicted, it would be the first time he faces criminal charges after leaving office. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Regina.
Emergency officials say at least 6 people are missing after Thursday's fire in a historic building in Old Montreal. Investigators had initially said one person was believed to be missing, but family members have now told police that others could have been in the building and may still be in the rubble. Montreal Fire Operations Chief Martin Guilbeault says finding and identifying any bodies could take a week.
For the moment, it is not possible to carry out research safely in the building. That must first be secured. During the weekend, we will work an intervention plan to allow our team to carry out research safely while trying to preserve the heritage structure.
Emergency officials say it may take several days or even weeks to determine the cause of the fire. The case has been handed over to the city's arson department. In Islamabad, Pakistan. Supporters of Imran Khan clashed with police as the former prime minister arrived at the country's high court. Khan is facing 85 criminal charges, all of which he denies. They include accusations that he took gifts that belonged to the state. After the brief court appearance, he returned home, where he talked about what might happen if he goes to jail.
I feel that there would be a very strong reaction, and it would be a reaction all over Pakistan. And I just think that those who are trying to do this just cannot comprehend the situation. Unfortunately, the mind that is thinking of either killing me or putting me in jail, I don't think they comprehend where Pakistan is situated right now.
Khan has not ruled out running again. He was brought down by a non-confidence vote in Pakistan's parliament nearly a year ago. That's the sound of protesters in the streets of Tel Aviv. Demonstrations in Israel are now in their 11th week against the far-right government and its proposed judicial reforms, which would give it power to override Supreme Court decisions. This week, as Israel's prime minister met with his German counterpart in Berlin, Israelis there protested his visit. Rebecca Collard reports.
Israelis living in Berlin greeting their Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with protest. Israeli protesters chanted no to dictatorship, yes to democracy. Some held Israeli flags, others held signs that said no pride in fascism. Itai Lahat holds a sign that says democracy. Remember what happened when it was lost here?
I'm here to protest about what's going on in Israel, in my home country, which is slowly but surely losing its democratic values and democratic character.
Inside the German chancellery, Netanyahu tried to persuade Olaf Scholz that his reforms are not a threat to democracy. It is not now the task of a German head of government to interfere with the specific details of Israel's domestic policy, Scholz said after the meeting. We can observe, we can ask questions, and express our concerns. For protesters like Lahat, that was not enough.
We would wish actually that the German government would not host Benjamin Netanyahu here. In the past, what happened here in Germany as well, on the experience of what happened here in Germany, to learn from it and to send also a message to the Israeli public.
For decades after the Second World War, many Jews and Israelis refused to even visit Germany. But now, as many as 25,000 Israelis live in Berlin. Some, like Noam Bruslovsky, are also escaping the political situation at home.
10 years and I've been watching everything that has happened in my homeland since I moved here, seeing it falling down, seeing it becoming more corrupt, more totalitarian.
Berlin has become an unexpected gathering place for liberal and leftist Israelis. There are numerous Jewish and Israeli groups here that organize across the political spectrum, from ones that focus specifically on fighting anti-Semitism to those that advocate on behalf of Palestinians and to end Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories.
I think there's a very deep cleavage between the right and the left wings in Israel.
Elise Wexler is the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. She holds a sign in Hebrew and Arabic that says, "Standing together for democracy for everyone." She says it's not that surprising that so many left-leaning Israelis choose Berlin, pointing to the number of Israelis with roots in Germany before the Holocaust.
And now we have the opportunity to come back here as free people, as safe people. I think this is Hitler's biggest nightmare.
While some here praise the space for political expression in Germany, Bruslovsky says it's not that simple.
It's very easy in this country to call everybody who's against the Israeli politics, to call them anti-Semites.
Bruslovsky says he is optimistic Germany and other European states are hearing the protesters' voices and will put pressure on the Israeli government. Rebecca Cullard for CBC News, Berlin.
Canada's smallest province is gearing up for a big election next month. The list of candidates running in PEI's provincial vote is now official, and while the number of people standing for election is the province's highest ever, the Liberals and Greens have declined to run a full slate of candidates. It may have something to do with how popular PC leader Dennis King continues to be, even through a series of disasters, major storms, trade disputes, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Kate McKenna looks at why King is expected to form government again.
Our leader, our premier.
In a packed church hall, Island Tories squeezed together for a big announcement. After weeks of speculation, incumbent Premier Dennis King confirmed Islanders will go to the polls next month.
I visited Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor, and I asked her to sign a writ of election.
He did it knowing opinion polls show his party in a commanding lead.
Well, they're in a very good position right now.
Don Desarud is a political scientist at the University of Prince Edward Island.
The Premier is a personally very popular person. People like him.
But he says the incumbent Progressive Conservatives could benefit from an unlikely ally, unrelenting disaster.
I think when you're in times of crisis, and there's been a lot of crises, you look to your government to provide you with some security.
The last 4 years were hard on PEI. It weathered two destructive storms, Dorian and Fiona. The province fought off COVID-19 longer than most places by closing its borders.
We have been successful as a province.
And a U.S. export ban on island potatoes cost farmers millions of dollars.
There is nothing wrong with our potatoes. They are of the highest quality. They are the best in the world.
Sweta Debu is with the PEI Coalition for Women in Government.
Dennis King he comes across really as a man of the people. He has a way of making people feel like they are heard.
She says the Green Party and the Liberals are fighting for second place. In the last election, the Greens won more seats than the Liberals. Debu says the political landscape has changed.
Their brand is still associated with being, the radical option. Right now, after, 2 hurricanes and a pandemic, people don't necessarily resonate with radical. They're looking for stable.
But she says the campaign just started, and lots of Islanders don't know how they'll vote.
Hi, I'm Peter Bevan Baker.
Peter Bevan Baker is the leader of the Green Party. He says voters are worried about issues like the cost and availability of housing, as well as the shortage of healthcare workers.
We have twice the number of vacancies in frontline healthcare workers than the national average. It's not a little bit worse, it's much worse.
But he admits his goal is to stay in the fight, not necessarily win it.
Clearly for us, the number one goal is to maintain all of the seats that we have.
For the next couple of weeks, all parties will crisscross the province jockeying for votes, knowing that in the end, the only poll that matters is on Election Day. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Charlottetown.
The demand for sustainable investment opportunities has surged in recent years. But while many companies and fund portfolios claim green credentials, the reality can be a bit murky. Nisha Patel has more on how Canadians can make sure investments line up with values.
Climate justice! Climate justice!
Outside the University of Toronto, showing up to a climate rally is one way student Sarthak Singh advocates for a greener future.
Climate anxiety is on an all-time high, and you see people react to it in different ways.
Another is by putting his money where his mouth is.
How can I diversify a bit? How can I make sure that I'm also making a positive impact on the world?
He's part of a campus club to promote sustainable investing, founded by Achint Singh.
To have a good quality of life and to live well, your environment needs to be right.
He says getting information on green companies and funds is tough.
We spend a lot of our time just wading through pages and pages of documents and trying to come up with our own understanding of what every particular company is doing.
And industry watchers say greenwashing can be a problem, where investments are advertised as more climate-friendly than they really are. Dan Van Acker represents the think tank Influence Map.
Right now, there's very little consistency or standardization of what it does or doesn't mean to be green.
While the government has proposed some green investing guidelines, which define which investments can use the green label, it carves out room for some high-polluting activities, which critics say makes no sense.
When it comes to marketing of green investments, it is a little bit of a Wild West.
Tim Nash is president of the financial coaching service Good Investing. He says an investment's labels may not tell the whole story.
A lot of Canadian environmentalists would be quite shocked to learn that Enbridge is inside of a fund that is labeled as sustainable.
Nash says investors need to take matters into their own hands.
It's really important that Canadian investors look under the hood of their investments to really understand what's inside the fund that they're about to purchase.
Experts say to avoid greenwashing, investors should know which companies are listed in green funds. Look beyond buzzwords like sustainable for specific phrases like fossil fuel free. And use screening tools like Morningstar that rate these funds on how green they are.
If we could get the whole industry on board to use the same terms and expressions, I think that would go a long way.
Back at U of T, Achint Singh says making it easier to invest sustainably will have ripple effects.
Impact investing, sustainable investing snowballs into a bigger movement. Companies will have to begin to pay attention to that movement.
Putting your money to work for you and for the environment.
What do we want? Climate justice! When do we want it? Now!
Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
For years, Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling has faced intense backlash for her views on transgender people. And just this week, Rowling reiterated her stance on a podcast. It casts a long shadow on the latest entry in the Harry Potter universe, a big-budget video game called Hogwarts Legacy. Jenna Benchitrit reports.
He recognized me instantly, which is more than I can say for some of my own classmates.
That's Serona Ryan, a fictional bartender in Hogwarts Legacy. Ryan is not a major character, but she stands out for one particular reason. She's transgender.
Took them a second to realize I was actually a witch, not a wizard.
The inclusion of a trans character is notable because of Harry Potter creator J.K. Rowling. Rowling has publicly disparaged transgender people and aligned herself with anti-trans causes, including opposing legislation in Scotland that would make it easier for people to legally change genders.
I am fighting what I see as a powerful, insidious, misogynistic movement.
Speaking on the podcast, The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling, Rowling recently defended her positions, saying she knew they would upset some Harry Potter fans.
I do not see this particular movement as either benign or powerless.
Even though it appears to be distancing itself from Rowling, not all gamers are buying Hogwarts Legacy's more inclusive world.
That is a little bit suspicious.
Games writer Samara Jade Sendek says the developer, Avalanche Software, only included a trans character to sidestep criticism.
Hey, look, we stuck a trans character in there. What more do you want of us? Kind of thing. And it's like, no, it rings hollow, it rings trite.
Further complicating the issue, Rowling owns the intellectual property and stands to profit from Hogwarts Legacy's success. Because of that, many have opted not to buy, play, or even review the game.
Gaming culture does not exist in a vacuum. Hogwarts Legacy does not exist in a vacuum, and I think does speak to how we as a larger culture are also kind of engaging with transphobia.
But gaming critic Carolyn Pettit thinks it's important to engage with properties like Hogwarts Legacy. She wrote a critical analysis of the game and its trans character for the website Kotaku.
For me, it's much better that she exists within the game and in the way that she does than it would be if she did not.
Despite the backlash, Hogwarts Legacy has proven to be a massive success, selling 12 million copies in the first 2 weeks of release. Jenna Benchitrit, CBC News, Toronto.
You're listening to The World This Weekend on CBC Radio. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. You can listen to this program anytime on the CBC Listen app or on the CBC News YouTube channel. It's a very special time of year for basketball fanatics. March Madness is underway, the university tournament that's a massive deal in the U.S. Fans on this side of the border have a huge stake in the games, with a record 53 Canadians in the tournament. Freelance sports journalist Ed Kleiman is in Albany, New York, which is one of 8 cities where men's games are being played this weekend. He spoke to us a little earlier. And I think March Madness is one of those things that some people know a lot about, others know very little, and I fall somewhere in the middle, I think. So first of all, what is March Madness and why are people mad for it?
This is the championship tournament for United States college basketball. And it is a very big deal. People get totally into it for a variety of reasons. It's a cultural phenomenon in the United States. And what makes it really unique to the American sports fan, I mean, it's right up there in terms of recognition, along with the Super Bowl and the Kentucky Derby. But this is different because, particularly in the early stages of the tournament, which is what we're in right now, it's just wall-to-wall basketball games between the men's tournament and the women's tournament, starting at lunchtime and going until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes you'll have 2 or 3 games going on at the same time, and there'll be this exciting finish in one and an exciting finish in another. And in one of those games, it might be a team from a tiny little school that nobody has heard of, that no one saw coming, taking on a big powerhouse. And it's that amazing upset dynamic that makes it so special.
Wow. So, I mean, as you said, we're pretty early on in this year's tournament, but what's been happening so far? Any upsets yet?
We have had the upset of all upsets that a lot of pundits are calling, and I tend to agree with them, the greatest upset of all time. So what we had was the lowest ranked tournament in the field, the team from Fairleigh Dickinson knocking off one of the top 4 seeds, Purdue. It was a favorite situation of about 24 points, according to the odds makers, that Fairleigh Dickinson was an underdog. And Purdue, I mean, you could just see it. They were so tense, so nervous. Purdue has a star player who happens to be from Toronto. He's going to be named the Collegiate Basketball Player of the Year. First time a Canadian's ever won that. Zach Edey. Did not play basketball until he was 16 years old. Took it up very late, got very good very quickly. He's this 7'4" center. He's amazing. And he played great, 21 points, 15 rebounds. The problem was everybody else. They couldn't shoot. They were so nervous. So the entire Fairleigh Dickinson team, which, by the way, is the shortest team in the tournament, against the tallest team in the tournament, they were just playing brilliant basketball, put the pressure on everybody else to beat them. And they couldn't do it. And now you have this historic upset. This is what the NCAA tournament is all about, and it makes it so exciting.
Well, clearly Canada is a rising power in basketball, which is great. But other than Zach Edey, who are the other Canadians that are making their mark in this tournament?
There are so many. We've got about 50 Canadians between the men and the women who made it into this tournament, which is a huge number, way up from what it used to be. Top of my list are 2 women. Letitia Amihere plays for the South Carolina Gamecocks. They're the defending champions. They have not lost a single game in over a year. totally dominant. And Letitia Amihere is one of their key players. She's going to be a superstar in the WNBA not too long down the road. And their great rival is the University of Connecticut. That's who they beat in the final last year. Connecticut is the dominant team historically in women's college basketball. And Aaliyah Edwards from Kingston, Ontario is their superstar. So we're looking at Canadian versus Canadian. And that's, I think, would be an amazing final if we could have that on the line. And then if I look on the men's side, there are a number of others as well. Marcus Carr of Texas, a 6'2" guard, in the first game of the tournament had 17 points, 4 assists. That team could go deep, and he's a key reason why. And also Charles Bediako of the top-ranked team from Alabama. He's 7 foot tall from Brampton, Ontario, had 9 points, 8 rebounds, 4 block shots. He's just a force in there. And again, for a team that's expected to go deep, a Canadian right at the center of it. And finally, I'll just mention a brother and sister. We've got the Prosper siblings. Olivier Maxence Prosper on Marquette. They are a threat to win this entire tournament. He's a defensive superstar. And Cassandra Prosper for Notre Dame, one of the few teams that can actually challenge Connecticut and South Carolina. She had 7 rebounds in her opening game. So Canadians all over the place. And most exciting is that some top teams have some Canadian top players driving them.
Great to hear about these Canadians doing so well, and great to chat as always, Ed. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
That was freelance sports journalist Ed Kleiman in Albany.
Listen to the wind blow, watch the sun rise.
You might think the best way to listen to Fleetwood Mac's Rumours is on vinyl. You would not be alone. LPs have been making their comeback for ages, but now it's official. The Recording Industry Association of America has this week said vinyl records outsold CDs in the U.S. last year for the first time since 1987, with 41 million records sold versus 33 million CDs. The top-selling LP last year? Like you even had to ask. Taylor Swift's Midnights sold 945,000 records. Now, some of that may be down to savvy marketing that encouraged people to buy more than one. There are 4 different versions of the album cover, and T. Swift explained that when you put them together...
It's a clock. It makes a clock. It could help you tell time. It looks so amazing.
But artists like Taylor Swift and Adele are also facing backlash because they are churning out huge numbers of records, some of which apparently haven't sold at all. There are photos online of stacks of Adele's latest record, 30, at Goodwill for $5. Big-time artists are being accused of clogging up a struggling industry that's dealing with supply shortages, bottlenecks, and wait times of 9 to 12 months. Some have taken matters into their own hands. Metallica has just bought a vinyl pressing plant. The White Stripes frontman Jack White built his own in 2017, and almost exactly a year ago issued this call.
I now ask the major labels, Warner Brothers, Universal, and Sony, to finally build your own pressing plants again. As the MC5 once said, you're either part of the problem or part of the solution.
The vintage vinyl format is also allowing people to rediscover the classics. The 9th and 10th best-selling vinyl albums last year were Michael Jackson's Thriller and the Beatles' Abbey Road. Number 5 was Rumours. So as music fans, old and new, rush to get their vinyl fix, it sounds pretty clear. Vintage formats still have their place. You've been listening to the radio show, The World This Weekend. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Good night.